All right, everyone. Let's continue. And we were talking about we brought this up in the last section. We talked about last time I talked about new material, we talked about the concept of alpha. Okay. And when people talk about the word alpha in terms of, I mean, it depends, I guess, how it's being used. Sometimes alpha means opacity. Sometimes, though, what it really means is um, where there is content. So here in this picture of Matt Hawk, Alpha Hawk, this is the content where the actual hawk is, and then the background itself, that is the empty area. So we would say that like this is the alpha, and then this area is blank. And there are formats that let you save the alpha. So for instance, like a PSD format or a PNG format will save the alpha with the image. Some image formats don't allow for this. So for instance, JPEG does not support alphas. If we go into Adobe After Effects, I have this hawk, okay? And what we can do is use the alpha of that image as a mask. Okay, remember that a mask, or it's not a mask technically, it's considered a track matte, but it's the same idea of utilizing the shape of something as a way of showing another level or another layer, or I like to think of it as like it's acting as a window into the content. So if I have this image, this is my composition window, and I'm going to go to this thing that kind of looks like three little circles, red, green, and blue, and I'm going to set this to alpha. Okay. And when I do that, it turns black and white. The black is where there is no alpha, and the white is where there's alpha. Okay. So it's not based on the content. This bird could be literally any color, any texture. It's about literally the contours. It's the positive, negative space, if you will. I'm going to set this back by going to RGB. And what I'm going to do here is select the layer that I'd like to apply the track matte to, and then go under track matte, and I'm going to set it to set track matte, which in this case is matte alpha hawk. And now you can see that the video is playing through the alpha of that layer. Now, when you do this, you'll notice that the track matte's turned off. It also gets this little icon that looks very similar to the mask icon in Adobe Photoshop, if you've ever used that. If you want, this is the track matte or the alpha matte being applied. If you don't want it being applied anymore, you could set it to no matte, and then it should go back to normal. Let's try it with a different image. Here I have this picture of a giraffe. And this giraffe also, if I were to take it into Adobe Photoshop, oops, here's the picture. Here it is. You can see that there's areas where it exists and there's blank areas here. And if I were to go back, once again, if I set this to alpha, I can kind of see this as the white is visible, or the where the alpha exists, and the black is where there's no alpha. I'm going to use, oops, turn this back into RGB, set the track matte to giraffe, and now it's going to play through that. Okay. You could even make your own track mats if you want to. So for instance, this layer, this composition set to 720 by 480. I'm going to go to a program like Photoshop, or here, let's even do it in Photopea just to prove it doesn't really matter what program it is. I'm going to set a new composition. You could do the same thing I'm doing right now in Adobe Photoshop. And I'm going to set this to 720 by 480, create. And I'm going to make a new layer. And what I'm going to do is grab a brush. It literally does not matter what I draw or what color. So just to prove it, I'll do that. And then I'll switch colors. and do that, and then click on this bad boy and do that, and then do it one more time because why not? And do that. All right. And now what I'm going to do is export this. Make sure you export it as one of those formats I talked about where you can, that supports alpha or saves alpha. So maybe like a PNG file or something along those lines. I could use some other formats would also do that, but I'm just going to use PNG. And I'll just call this my alpha mat. All right, let's save that bad boy. And I'm just going to put it into the same folder. Should go inside of here, inside of drill files. Boom. Let's go back, import that. And there's the one I just created. I'm going to turn this one off and let's apply it. There you go. And then I'm going to set this to my new image. And there you go. You can see how I just created my own unique alpha mat there. All right, here what I've done is this is exercise 8. I want you to notice, so these were all just vector shapes that I built and I animated them. Okay, this one's spinning, there's a star that's, scaling. There's a rectangle that's moving. And this composition has its own alpha. If I were to set this to alpha, you can see the areas that are white are where there's alpha, and where they're black, there's no alpha. So even though this is animating, it's no different than what we were just doing. Now what I'm going to do, so I made this its own composition. Then what I'm going to do is, we've talked about nesting before, or putting one composition within another composition. I'm going to take this and drop it in. Now, by default, it's just literally putting in the content as such. But what I want to do is use the alpha of this. So I'm going to set this track mat to here. And you can see what I've done is I've made an animated track mat, or animated alpha track mat. So you can do some interesting things here. Once again, I want to go back. Let me set this back to RGB. Maybe, I don't know, I'm gonna just make another circle. I'm gonna animate this. So this is gonna start here. And let's animate and maybe play around with scale. Oops. So you can see how this is being added. I go back here and that should update and it affects the alpha, my alpha mat here. Okay. All right. Let's talk about Let's talk about a Luma mat. A Luma mat is essentially the same concept. The difference is rather than dealing with the alpha, we're dealing with luminance. So when we measure luminance, it goes dark, midtone, bright. So shadow or darks, midtone, which is medium, and then highlights or bright areas. And what I'm going to do is we're going to I have this video here, and this video has dark areas or shadows, bright areas or highlights, and then things kind of in between. And what we can do is use that luminance as a matte, okay? So in other words, what we can do is we can say, okay, where there is luminance, then the video will shine through. Where there's not luminance, where there's shadows, the video will be hidden, and then everything in between. So I'm going to set this track matte to fireworks. And it may default to the alpha matte, which looks like this, looks like a circle. You want to make sure it's using luminance. And to make sure that, you click on this again, and you can see how this kind of looks like the sun now. And you can see that my video is coming through where there was luminance. Okay, you're getting kind of this interesting effect here. Okay. Now, of course, this is all dependent on the video. I don't know if I can find a video really quickly that might have luminance. So let's do video. This is all on the fly, so this may not work. So if it doesn't work out, oops, sorry. But let's see, black and white video. It doesn't have to be black and white. I just feel like it's easier to sort of understand when things are in black and white when you talk about luminance. So uh, I don't know. This is probably a good one. So the first part of that video, let's just pause it for a second. This is actually going to be the opposite. So like this is the highlights or the part that's going to get kept, this light background. And actually this part is the shadows. So that's actually going to be dropped out. And then the rest of this here is kind of in the midtone. So we'll see how this looks. It's going to be kind of reverse of maybe what we normally would want. So I'm just going to download this and let's bring this in. Once again, things don't have to be black and white, but I think when you start off, it helps to sort of understand it better. It's easier, I think, to understand when things are literally black and white. So I'm gonna turn this off. Let's get rid of that bad boy. Let's put in this, oops, did it not? Let's put in this skateboard video. I'll just blow it up a little bit. All right. All right, so I'm gonna set this to the video. And you can kind of see just to kind of show you what's happening. I'm going to put a red solid background behind the video. This part, I know it looked white. It was actually cutting this out of the video. So this part's being kept. This part was being cut out. That's why you can see this red background. And so you get kind of this like, this thing going on here. So, you can get some interesting kind of effects there, depending on the video. If you want a little more control, what you could do is build your own Luma mat. So here, let me just show you how you could build your own Luma mat as a static one. So for instance, once again, I'm going to go to like, I don't know, Photo P. And let's make a 720 by 480 again, because that's the size. And remember that Luma is all about how bright or dark something is. So I'm going to set it to black because and then let's just say for the sake of argument, the Luma is like this. So like wherever there's white, that's going to be the part that you can see through the video. And then I'm actually going to set this to like a medium gray. And remember that a medium gray is like semi-transparent. So it's not invisible. It's also not 100% visible. This is kind of in between, depending on the level of gray. I'm going to save this as my Luma mat. I'll just save this, and then let's bring that into the project. And I'll bring it in here, and then set that to here. And you can see how it's gotten rid of this, it's kept this part, and then this is kind of like semi-transparent. So I built my own Luma mat there just by using some sort of drawing tool. Literally using black, white, and gray, you could do this, but we can also do it within After Effects. So let me show you what I've done. Once again, I made a new composition and I set the background to black. If for some reason you can't do that, you can always make it just a solid black image or whatever by going to layer solid. And then this basically lets you make a layer that's just a solid color. And I'm going to make this literally black. I'll just call it like black background or something very unoriginal like that. And I could stick it in the back just to be 100% sure that I have a black background. Then I made a bunch of, I locked them at the moment, but essentially what I did is I made a bunch of vectors that are white. Actually, I take that back. Um, what I did here is this is white, this is like half gray, and then I think you can't see it because it's literally black on black, but I think if we set this to like a different color, oops, unless this is set to, yeah, there we go. Yeah, anyway, yeah, there you go. All right, so I'm gonna go back. Let's bring in this composition that compresses everything into one layer like this. Then we can use this as a Luma mat. Okay. Once again, if I want to go back, let's make a new vector shape or whatever it is I want to do. I'm going to make a circle and let's animate that circle doing something like this. Okay. So the luminance, I would also probably turn off the stroke because that's actually going to come through as invisible. So let's turn the stroke off temporary or just for this project. There you go. All right, and then I go back here and then there you go. Yeah, it's updated and affected. So there are, in the same way we had animated masks and you guys did a lab on that, we can also have animated track mats and such. Okay. So try that out. That should have been 7, 8, 9, and 10, please.